The Dallas Cowboys, they like to call themselves America's team, but recently they have more closely resembled the old primetime soap opera with the same setting, Dallas. Well, now they have a new coach, larger than life, but with a life that is up from never. And Bob Costas is here to tell us more about that tonight. Bob?
How you doing, Tom? And thank you for loaning me one of your ties. Coaching the Dallas Cowboys may be the most visible non-playing position in all of American sports. So pretty soon, Barry Switzer, the man who replaced Jimmy Johnson as coach of the Super Bowl champs, will be a household name. There'll be plenty of analysis of the job he's doing, about whether or not the Cowboys miss Jimmy Johnson, about how Switzer is getting along with the dynamic and strong-willed owner, Jerry Jones. That's all to be expected. But what you might not expect is where Barry Switzer came from and the unusual path he took to where he is now. Barry Switzer is a man near the top of his profession, a man placed in charge of the most dominant team in the NFL. He's also a man who grew up in poverty and felt the guilt of a family tragedy for over 20 years. He fought his way out of it playing and coaching football. He's a man who became one of the winningest coaches in the history of the college game. 3 national championships at the University of Oklahoma, only to have it end in scandal. And for the past 5 years, this is a man who thought he would never coach again. Never again do the one thing he did best and enjoyed most. It's been a long, sometimes strange trip for Barry Switzer, and it all started in Costas, Arkansas.
I grew up in a community in South Arkansas, right on the Louisiana line, in the 40s and 50s, with a group of black families that surrounded us. The only people I had to play with were the children in the little black community, and so it was old Sam Lawson's cafe up there. They had a little cafe and a honky-tonk, and I spent a lot of time up there playing basketball and the dust behind a lot of those houses.
There's still a black community behind the old Switzer homestead, and they still remember the Switzers. In fact, Sam Lawson's son still lives there.
Yeah, I remember when he used to walk by here, going to school. Yeah, he had a lot of friends here. He made me a Dallas Cowboys fan now.
And downtown, these good old boys used to love to watch Barry play high school ball.
He's a good player.
He's tough.
He's tough. He's mean. Hell, somebody not looking, he'd give him a damn... yeah, he'd do it to you.
Describe the house you lived in Costas, Arkansas.
My daddy was a bootlegger, and he wanted it this way. We lived way out in the country, as I said. We didn't have...
Did you have indoor plumbing?
No, we didn't have electricity till I was in the 9th grade. My mother and grandmother, when we'd go out in the evening before they'd retire, we would have to go to the privy, and but the reason I'd carry a pistol, because there had been some copperheads who were underneath the privy out there at one time. So you're not going to get my mama and my grandmama go to that privy without...
You got to be a darn good shot to pick off a copperhead in the dark.
Oh, but
especially in a compromised position.
But I was a good shot in those days.
What kind of guy was your dad?
He's a good guy. Wasn't a good husband, but he was a good father. He lived on the edge. He was a gambler, and he started selling whiskey in a dry county, and it ends up being arrested several times. He goes to jail, the county jail. Finally, they really get after him, and he goes to prison, Arkansas State Penitentiary. And when we drive up to that prison farm, I can see it, still see it today, and those guys in black and white striped convict prison uniforms and flatbed trailers and picking cotton, and we'd sit on his cotton and we'd eat. But those were humiliating experiences at that time.
Barry and his brother Donnie put up with that humiliation much better than their mother did.
She never got to go anywhere, and she was isolated there, and barbiturates, drugs, alcohol. You know, she was a sick, emotionally sick person, and all she wanted to be loved. And
I've seen pictures of her. She was attractive.
Yeah.
And I read that she was the valedictorian of her high school class.
She was the valedictorian of her high school in 1932. But, you know, we didn't know what she needed. We couldn't help her. And we weren't smart enough. You know, we didn't know.
And then one night when Barry was home from college, he had to face something no one is prepared to deal with.
Well, I was home that night, and she was on barbiturates and had had the alcohol, and I hated to see her like that. And I just told her that I didn't want to ever see her like that. And she took a gun and went out and shot herself. heard the shot, and I picked her up. Well, she lived, you know, damn, I hate talking about this. There was a suicide note, and I didn't know it for 20 years because my brother found it. He's younger than me by 6 years and gave it to Daddy. I didn't know. I thought I'd caused that for 20 years. But she had prepared to do this. And I was just the one that kind of made her say, oh, I'm going to do it now.
You thought you'd pushed her over by
rejecting her? Came in to kiss me that night in bed, and I just, you know, like most kids would see when their folks like that, would turn their head.
Barry found out about the note only a few years ago when he was working on his autobiography with his brother Donnie.
I found the suicide note myself a few days after she died. And my dad made the request of me, and there I was 15 years old, and I did what my dad said, and I just never thought to tell Barry until I think we were working on his book.
Have you come to terms with it yet?
And I know that once I found out that there was a suicide note, you know what I mean, that changed a lot. You know, it changed a lot for me to know is that one incident, I didn't cause her to take 38 and go out and put her head and kill herself.
Barry continued to play football at Arkansas. Eventually, he landed a job there as freshman coach. Two of his players were none other than the current owner of the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, and Jimmy Johnson, the man Switzer replaced as Cowboys coach. Switzer then moved on to an assistant coach's job at Oklahoma. Naturally, Frank Switzer was proud, but he wouldn't see his son make it to head coach.
How did he die?
He had a black mistress, caught him with another black woman, and she shot him, and she was killed rushing him to the hospital. I can hear her daddy's telling you, bitch, take me to the hospital now, and I can just see him roaring away from that house, and she lost control of the car, and they turned over and exploded and burned up.
He died in a car wreck.
An accident.
Coming to the hospital. Hit a telephone pole.
Car exploded and burned.
Barry Switzer's background probably had a lot to do with why he was successful at Oklahoma, and maybe why it ended as it did. The charismatic Switzer was one of the first Southern coaches to actively recruit black players. He was also known as a player's coach, emotional, compassionate. He understood their problems. But maybe that same background produced a coach who'd be too lenient and all too willing to look the other way, especially in the pursuit of victory. Within your program, a number of things happened. There was a shooting. There was a gang rape. Your starting quarterback was caught selling cocaine. There were allegations of other things. The school wound up on 3 years probation. They said that cash and cars and airline tickets wound up in the hands of players. It's what the NCAA calls a lack of institutional control. And it got to a point where the governor of Oklahoma said, I'm disgusted by the Oklahoma football program.
Well, I tell you, I feel very sorry that those things happened for the University of Oklahoma football program, especially the felonies that impacted. The fact that airline tickets were bought for kids that couldn't get home any other way. I never lost any sleep over. So I don't feel badly about that at all. The felonies, I feel, but that's part of society. I can't know where they all are at all times and what they're all doing. There's no way. It's just impossible to police your program.
Many disagreed, and he was forced to resign. For 5 years, nobody would hire him. The only coaching the divorced father of 3 did was working with his sons. His daughter Kathy says that although he was busy with business ventures, something was clearly missing.
He's missed it. He's watched a lot of NFL, and we've all talked about what if, you know, someday it could happen. And he always said he'd never go north or east. He'd only want to go south or west, and Dallas Cowboys is the most perfect, ideal job there is.
Okay, so Switzer wanted the Cowboy job. No surprise there. The question is, why did Cowboy owner Jerry Jones want his old freshman coach, Barry Switzer?
It's ironic, isn't it, that Barry Switzer might not have been able to get an interview from any other team in the National Football League. If you asked the 27 other teams to draw up a list of 10 candidates, he might not have been on the top 10 list of any other team, and yet he was the top choice for the best team in the league.
It's a prerequisite that whoever is the coach of the Dallas Cowboys needs to work very closely with me. I think that Barry fits that pistol and is qualified because of my familiarity with him and because I was able, within the context of people that I knew, to satisfy my mind that the loyalty was there, the appreciation of the opportunity is there, certainly the skills are there.
It may be a tough job for Switzer, though. Jones, after all, parted company with Jimmy Johnson after he and Johnson built the Cowboys from a 1-15 record to double Super Bowl champs in just 5 years. But their clash of wills and egos became too much. Now with Switzer, Jones believes he'll have a coach who appreciates the fact that Jones spent almost every dime he had buying the team, and that ownership has its prerogatives.
I think Barry understands that. I think he understands that I'm sensitive about it. That was a problem with Jimmy and me. That won't be a problem with Barry.
He has every right to walk in any room, any office in this building any time and say, hey, I love the Dallas Cowboys and I hope you love them as much as I do. So he's welcome to come to my office anytime.
There's almost no place he can be then, and almost nothing he can do that you could foresee that's going to knock you off kilter.
Hey,
if he wants to be on the sideline at the end of the game,
I'm going to say, Jerry, get your butt out of the house because you don't belong there. And he knows that, but he's never going to attempt that.
But he belongs on the sideline if he wants to be.
He owns the stadium. It's his football team. I have no problem if he wants to come stand beside me with a headset on during the ball game. That doesn't bother my ego, Bob.
Fine, even if Switzer's ego is in check, will this be enough for someone as demanding as Jones? The owner's mastery of the business and organizational aspects of football is unquestioned, but the perception persists that Jones thinks he could do the coach's job. In fairness, Jones has said he has no such intentions, but
if you had to, if in some weird scenario you had to, do you believe you could?
If I had to step out here and basically get up to date, basically prepare myself, then certainly I've got to believe that I could do it. Now, the job I do would remain to be seen, but I do believe that, yes.
What would prevent Jerry Jones and Barry Switzer from screwing it up? Two strong-willed men?
I'm at an age where I feel fortunate to have an opportunity to get a chance to do something that I never dreamed that I would ever have a chance to do. And I'm having that chance and opportunity now, and I don't care who gets the credit. The Dallas cheerleaders, the guys that mow the grass, the guys that wash the jocks and socks. I don't care, because you know what? It takes all of them to make it happen anyway.
So here we have a man who seems more than willing to share the credit, but if things go wrong, he and Jones will get most of the blame.
This is America's team, for all that implies good and bad, and there will be some unfair criticism. It is inevitable. You could go 15-1 and you will get some wicked criticism for the one.
I would take 15-1 and run with it and take all you can heap on me. But yeah, I'm sure we will. And that's just part of the game. And I don't bother me. I'm pretty thick-skinned, and I've always said that whatever you give me in the future ain't gonna be as bad as what I've had in the past. So bring it on.
Bob, obviously everyone is moved by his story. It is really an extraordinary tale of achievement, but the fact is, when he was at Oklahoma, under his supervision, there was a scandal of national proportions in the athletic program.
Yeah, and it was extreme, even by the current, somewhat corrupt standards of major college sports in America, and he has to bear a large portion of the responsibility for that. He sort of soft-pedaled it when I asked him if he views this Cowboy thing as a chance for redemption. But I think anybody deep down would. He and Jerry Jones both believe the relationship will be different than Jones's relationship with Johnson. They believe they can be successful, and if so, he can write a different final chapter.